Excellence is not perfectionism, so it's not doing everything great all the time. Excellence is not winning at all costs. Excellence is not a standard. It's not getting a gold star or straight A's or running a sub 230 marathon. Excellence is a process. The mix of caring deeply about something and doing it in a way with integrity to your values. Forget excellence, that's human flourishing. Yeah, the only Zen on the top of the mountain is the Zen that you bring up with you along the way. You got to find the Zen along the way. The Zen is in the process. Now, the only thing that fills the hole inside is the satisfaction that you get from the process. So it's very non-dual. Yeah, try to win, get that outcome. And you better find the Zen along the way because it's not going to be there at the top.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter. Welcome, everyone. If you enjoy the show, please consider subscribing on your favorite podcast listening platform and YouTube. You can now also check out the full video episode on X. Please also consider sharing your favorite episodes and leaving a review. If you do that and tag me or send me a screenshot, I will enter you in a monthly raffle for a free 30-minute consultation with me. For full episode details, including notes, timestamps, transcripts, and the show Patreon page, and other ways to support the show, please head over to my website at zachbitter.com. There you can find all my coaching services, including some new offerings for 2025. You can also sign up for my Substack newsletter, where I have been publishing my training journal weekly, as well as other topic-based posts. If you have any questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to reach out to me on my website or at hpopodcast@gmail.com. A big thanks to Element Electrolytes, Delta G Ketones, ProBio Nutrition, and Training Peaks for supporting the podcast. I have links and promotions to these brands in the show notes, but you can also get them here. If you want to check out Element Electrolytes, head over to drinklmnt.com/HPO. That'll get you a free sample pack with your first purchase. At deltagketones.com, if you enter promo code BITTER20, you will get 20% off your next purchase. And if you go to probionutrition.com, enter promo code ENDURANCE, and that will get you 20% off your next purchase. If you're interested in getting deeper into your own training data, head over to trainingpeaks.com/HPO podcast.
All right, Brad, thanks for coming back on the podcast.
Hey, Zach, it's great to see you again and to be back.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on. I think we have a fun topic to dive into today around just this idea of like excellence or mastery and how we maybe go about that with our within our daily lives and kind of everything that goes into what is the modern world, so to speak.
Yeah, that's right. It is something that I've been thinking about, you could say, for my entire adult life. Built a philosophy of life around the pursuit of excellence, but particularly now in today's modern world with just ubiquitous distraction. Feels challenging, but we still have agency and we can exert that agency to build excellence into our lives.
Yeah, I think with modern day, we have this almost like gluttony of options, so to speak, where we just have a lot of different things that we could be doing that in the past maybe we wouldn't have had access to just due to limitations in inventions or limitations in time, because things like survival or just getting by was such a big part of the day. There wasn't really a whole lot of free time to really think about anything other than that. But now we have this opportunity to do a lot more exploring, be a lot more curious. So I wonder with your research and things like that, do you have a working definition of what you consider like excellence to be that's a little more maybe broad scope in terms of what people could think about when they think of just, okay, there's this concept of pursuing excellence?
Yeah, let me start by saying what excellence is not, because there are so many common imposters to excellence. Excellence is not perfectionism, so it's not doing everything great all the time. Excellence is not winning at all costs. Excellence is not a standard. It's not getting a gold star or straight A's or running a sub 230 marathon. Excellence is a process. I'm going to talk more about that later. Excellence is not optimization. It's not needing to try to turn yourself into a robot that has everything so dialed in that there's no room for the messiness of life. Excellence is not a 47-step routine. Excellence is not needing to wake up at 4 a.m. and document your morning on Instagram. All of these things are what I call pseudo excellence. And it is generally a bunch of elaborate kabuki portrayed by marketers that is mistakes for the real thing. A big part of why I wrote this book is I want to reclaim genuine, true, real, heartfelt excellence. And how I define that is caring deeply and throwing yourself into worthwhile pursuits that align with your values. So it is as simple and as hard as that, caring deeply and throwing yourself into worthwhile pursuits that align with your values. And both parts of that definition are quite important. So the caring deeply and throwing yourself into, that means that you have to give a damn. Like you can't just go through life with this nonchalance. And you not only have to give a damn, but you also have to focus and bring intention. That's the throwing your all into something. And then worthwhile pursuits that align with your values. You want your work and how you are working to be expression of yourself, and also to realize that the things that you're working on are also working on you. So we think that our goal might be to run a marathon or run an ultra marathon, and we're working on that goal. But the marathon and the ultra marathon is also shaping our character. It's also working on us. So that's where the values come into play, because you can be extremely competent or proficient at something, but it's not excellence unless you're expressing yourself in the work. So there's got to be that values element.
Yeah, it's a great description. And I think it's really interesting when you really back up and try to digest that, because it almost is the end product. The end product is really a non-issue. It's about finding what within the process of trying to reach to that end product is going to teach you the lessons that are going to be fulfilling, that are going to give you that genuine reward that I think we're craving for at a human level. I remember you talking about a specific situation for yourself that I thought really highlighted this perfectly, which was your deadlifting goal, trying to deadlift 600 pounds. And the way you described it was just so funny to me, because it was like, yeah, there really isn't a good functional reason to be able to deadlift 600 pounds other than just it's this like thing that puts a spot on the calendar, so to speak, or to work towards. And then everything that you scaffold around that to get there was where the real purpose is. So other people might not care about deadlifting and pick something entirely different, but that process of getting to whatever that happens to be will probably look quite similar to yours if it's truly trying to strive for excellence.
Yeah, that's a great example, and that's a great way to put it. I would argue that deadlifting is one of the most inherently meaningless pursuits there is. You are literally just picking up a loaded bar from the ground to your hips. You're not even putting it over your head. You're not doing it outside. So at least y'all ultra runners get like some nature in your meaningless pursuit. But these pursuits don't have inherent value. They don't have inherent meaning. All the meaning is what we create as we go about the goal. So whether or not that weight comes up to my hips doesn't actually have any real impact in the universe. But what I learn about myself in vulnerability, in fear, in resilience, in setbacks, in being uncomfortable, in doing hard things, and having failures, and then also having successes, and doing it in community, and wanting to quit, and not quitting, and needing to rest and recover, and overshooting the target, and undershooting the target, and on. That's the value of trying to deadlift 600 pounds. It's not that I'm working on the deadlift, it's that the deadlift's working on me. And I spoke to so many different people in different fields. Athletes across different sports, runners, power sports, team sports, racket sports, swimming, water sports. And they all said the same thing, that when they step back, what they're doing really has no meaning in the universe, but it's all the meaning that they ascribe it by caring deeply and doing it in a way that aligns with their values. That's what gets you hooked on it. That's what makes you come back. That's where you learn and grow. I heard the same thing from artists, from musicians, from surgeons, from entrepreneurs, from executives, from coaches, from teachers. So I really think that I'm onto something here where genuine excellence is an aspiration. We never arrive, because anyone who's ever deadlifted 600 pounds or hit their marathon goal or gotten into med school knows that you're content for an hour and then you're thinking about the next goal. So it's really about shaping yourself in the process and giving a damn about something. I think you mentioned like the modern world can smooth things over and give us all these choices. I think the modern world also sometimes have this ethos where like people just go through the motions and they don't really care deeply about something. And I think that the mix of caring deeply about something and doing it in a way with integrity to your values, forget excellence, that's human flourishing. That's what this book is really all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really interesting to me to read the book because I was connecting some dots with my own experiences too. And one thing I kind of realized while going through it was, if I look at my pursuit within the endurance world from the very beginning to now. If I look at the very first endurance race I did, which was this 1 mile run that we did at FIDA class in middle school, I ran like a 7:30 and was like faster than 7 of my peers or something like that. And it was totally inconsequential and like it produced no real value to anyone other than myself. But the idea of doing that and just having this like process of, at that time I was exploring all these different sports. I was trying to figure out like what ones am I better at, what ones do I struggle more with, which ones give me the most enjoyment, the most excitement, which is what I actually care about. And for whatever reason, after that 1 mile run, I got that sort of sense of emotion of, oh, this is something I can care deeply about. This is going to be meaningful. I want to continue to explore this. And if I fast forward to the best race I've ever run, which is a 100-mile race that I did where I PR'd, the end result of hitting that goal really didn't feel any better necessarily than that first mile that I ran at 7:30 pace. It had a lot of the similarities in there was like a quest to find something and get to it and then achieve it or find my limits to some degree. But other than the fact that it was just more public and I got a lot of like small short-term dopamine hits from the publications and things that kind of surrounded it, often they eventually fade. It really wasn't that much different of an experience. And then it really does teach you that lesson of like nowadays you look online and you just see the best of the best in literally every discipline. And the average person almost needs to look at that as, okay, there's some motivation there, but in reality, I can get that same experience within myself by just, like you said, finding something that you actually generally care about.
Yeah, the only Zen on the top of the mountain is the Zen that you bring up with you along the way. Like you got to find the Zen along the way. The Zen is in the process. Now, it's not a book that says we should all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and outcomes don't matter. I actually don't believe that. Outcomes do matter, right? Like in your case, you win those races and now instead of working a corporate job, you get to be a professional athlete and you get to have a podcast. Like that matters. That shifts your life. There's often large financial reasons that outcomes matter. Outcomes can lead to new opportunities. Like you have a book published and suddenly big magazines want you to write for them and you get to work with fascinating editors. So we should want to win. And we should want to get to the top of the outcome. Sorry, not the top of the outcome. Let me say it again. We should want to win and we should want to get to the top of the mountain and we should care deeply about it. And not either or, but and at the same time, we should keep in mind that if we think that getting there is going to fix the hole inside, it's not. Like the only thing that fills the hole inside is the satisfaction that you get from the process. So it's very non-dual. Yeah, try to win, get that outcome. And you better find the Zen along the way because it's not going to be there at the top. And then to your second point about we look online and we just see the world-class world beaters in every single craft, I think that's another misconception that people think that excellence is only for those with impeccable genetics or that are the best at what they do. But excellence can be found in running your first 5K. Like it is not the standard. It is the feeling of aliveness and the character development that you get from giving something your all in a way that aligns with your values and just pursuing it hard. And that is one of the most generative things in the world. And when we witness it in others who are great, no doubt about it, that also leads to a feeling of aliveness. When I watch a Steph Curry jump shot, I feel that like deep in my soul. When I sit in front of a Rothko painting, like there's something so emotional about it. When I taste the creation of a master chef, like I feel that in my bones. And as a witness, excellence is beautiful. But I also feel that when I'm trying to deadlift. And I'll tell you what, I'm still not at 600 pounds. And even if I hit it, you look at my age group and my weight, I'm a long way from being world class. I'm a long way from being national class. I'm a long way from being all state. But I still get that feeling of aliveness. And that's what we're all after in this kind of numbed out AI slop, increasingly digital dopamine fentanyl world. I want to reclaim excellence because I want to reclaim humanity.
Just a quick reminder, Training Peaks is one of the best tools for monitoring your training progress and my go-to tool when coaching individuals. At Training Peaks, you can get deep into the data, assess training load, recovery, and easily monitor progress across all training intensities. It is a perfect example of a program that takes much of the guesswork out of your training and coaching experience. I really love assessing intervals on Training Peaks. One of the first things I'll do when I get back from a run is I'll hop onto Training Peaks, unpack all that data and just see how each of those individual intervals went and really dive into where I could maybe improve in the future. So if you're interested in getting deeper into your own training data, head over to trainingpeaks.com/HPO podcast.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I'd be curious what your thoughts are too around like the pursuit of finding your natural or your limitations given all the complications that can come up and essentially remove perfection from the board from even the best of the best. Is this idea for me where someone asked me once, okay, like you continue to run these 100-mile races. What if you never PR again? Are you going to look back at that as, man, maybe you should have stopped and moved on to something else after you ran your fastest 100-mile and just focused your energy somewhere else? And I was thinking about that for a minute. So there's definitely a lot of things that I could do if I wasn't spending 20 hours a week kind of training and prepping for training and doing all the supplementary stuff that kind of keep you upright for running and training for 100-mile races. But my thought was like, if I had stopped then and never explored, could I go faster? Then I miss out on that piece of the journey of really knowing in my mind that I did get to that conclusion of answering that question of how fast can I do this, given all the uniqueness to my lifestyle and the inputs of it versus somebody else. That was just another kind of piece to that puzzle for me in terms of what is the real reason for why you're doing this when you remove some of the shiny objects at the end of some of these pursuits.
I love that example so much. It's going to be an inroads to talk about something else. This is from the chapter in the book on consistency, which is one of my favorite chapters. In personal development, in performance books, there tends to be this very common aphorism, get just 1% better every day. And I agree with it as a mindset, which is you don't need to hit home runs. You should just show up and put the ball in play. And you just make these little incremental gains and you chip away, and then eventually you get something big. And that is wonderful. However, at a certain point in any discipline, you get to a place where you are not going to get 1% better every day. If I were to get 1% better every day in the weight room, I'd be deadlifting 900 pounds. Like eventually the motivation has to shift from those small, tangible, concrete gains to exactly what you said, to curiosity about what am I capable of and how am I going to explore my limits? Because if you get latched on to that beginner's high of 1% better every day, you are going to flame out after the honeymoon period. And so many people do. So I think that's actually like a big mistake in all of these self-help books that say, just get 1% better every day. That's great for getting to be pretty good at something. But if you want to push your limits, and I think where all the interesting stuff happens is actually when you stop getting 1% better every day, then the drive has got to shift from tangible progress to just rote curiosity and self-discovery. The example that I use in the book, and I swear the book has plenty of examples. It's not a powerlifting book. I'm not really a meathead, but this is just such a profound example. The world champion powerlifter, Lane Norton, it took him 10 years to take his deadlift from 715 pounds to 723 pounds. So dude was getting like 0.5% better every year. And when I spoke with Lane about this, I'm like, how'd you stick to it? And I just am so freaking curious. And the motivation shifts from I need to get better to I just want to see what I'm capable of. And in the training session, I want to see if I can feel the weight move differently. And I want to make these subtle tweaks. And I want to have a year where I actually go down in weight and be able to sit with it and feel that discomfort and the anxiety about what's happening and learn how to endure that too. And the whole thing, and he's the best in the world, so the outcome matters. He won a world championship. He's very proud of it. But the whole thing becomes about self-discovery. And I talk to the greats in all these fields, and they all get to that point. Because if you don't get to that point, you burn out when you stop getting 1% better every day.
Yeah, that's a great story. I think it makes a ton of sense too, because when I think about where we're actually extracting value from these things, so much of it's in the struggle to, I worked hard and therefore I got this result or this sensation or this feeling that is tied to some value system that I determined was important for me to finding just value in life, essentially. And when you think of it through that lens, you get to this point where if I don't actually have to work for that dopamine hit, there's probably going to be some sort of payback down the road that isn't fulfilling, where we all know the feeling of hopping on social media, getting a quick dopamine hit, and then feeling terrible about yourself an hour later because now all of a sudden you have really no tangible reward for doing that other than just feeling guilty that you wasted a bunch of time versus I go out and do a hard workout for an hour. Yeah, I could do something else that maybe is a little more productive that time, but afterwards I feel great about myself. I feel accomplished, and that just feeds into the value system that I set for myself.
Yeah, I love it. In the book, I call it shitty flow. So there's all these sources of shitty flow where like we just get into the zone and get these dopamine hits, but then afterwards we feel like we need a hot shower because it's like shitty. And what separates shitty flow from real flow, good flow, is that good flow often only happens if you first endure a period of resistance. Nobody just hits a button and gets into the zone. You have to nail the fundamentals for days, for weeks, in some cases for years before you even give yourself the chance at the transcendent moment. But the modern world has all of these sources of shitty flow. And I didn't use this in the book because it's a little bit out there, but it just popped into my mind now. I haven't talked about this in another interview. I hope this is okay. It's an extreme example, but I think it's a really good metaphor. So you can be in an intimate relationship with another person, a husband, wife, a partner, or you can just log on to Pornhub. And the log on to Pornhub version feels great. There's zero resistance. It's super quick. But if that is your only source of intimacy, your only source of connection, it's probably not going to leave you feeling so good in the long haul. Whereas if you commit to an intimate relationship to another person, it takes a lot more resistance. There is a lot more friction. There are ups and downs, and it is often challenging, but it's also a lot more fulfilling. This is a metaphor for just about everything in life these days. You have a Pornhub version of running. You have a genuine version of running. The Pornhub version is sitting on social media, being in the rage comments, mimicking other people's goals, photoshopping everything that you do, cheating, lying about your results and on. Or you can actually go train hard for a race. And the latter has more resistance up front, but is so much more fulfilling on the back end. And increasingly, I think I probably need a better metaphor than the Pornhub version because I don't know what that's rated, but there's just like the superficial version that feels great in the moment, but doesn't really fulfill you in the long term versus the actual thing. And the actual thing always requires overcoming some resistance. It's like the difference between eating Skittles and eating salmon. Skittles are a lot easier to eat at first because they just taste great. But eventually, if all you ate was Skittles, you feel like crap. The first few bites of salmon probably don't taste as good as the first few bites of Skittles, but a diet of salmon is such a more nourishing, satisfying diet.
I think even like the preparation of food kind of has that play into it too, where if I go and just get a really high quality, nutritious meal, but it was prepared for me and it's quick and immediate delivered to my house or something like that versus me sitting down and saying, okay, I'm going to create this. When I'm eating that meal, it might taste exactly the same. The quality may actually be worse if I'm making it, to be honest.
I was going to say, it's probably better if it's delivered. If you cook anything like me.
Probably. But just the idea that kind of I created that, and then that it's that resistance piece that you were talking about there that creates that real sensation. And with a lot of food and flavorful things, that's a very short-term reward. There was some friction in acquiring, and I think that's probably where I would see the value in that. Versus the better prepared, quick, easy access delivery system.
Yeah, 100%. And you want to keep the main things in your life. So I don't think that you need to do everything with friction. I think there's a time and a place for the delivery food. I think a lot of people rely on it for good reason. I just think the problem becomes when you don't have anything in your life that you care about that requires some hard work and friction.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into that topic of just having things in your life that you can pivot to that are meaningful, but not necessarily all meaningful on a uniform scale, being like equally distributed in terms of their weights towards how you approach them. But we get into this idea, especially when words like, and you touched on this a little bit already, was with excellence, things that you feel like you kind of have to go monk mode of, I need to pour everything into this. I need to remove any distraction and just really nail down. And that's just something that looks great on paper because you think, it goes into that perfection mindset, right? It's putting a target in place that's not actually achievable. And then if anything goes wrong within that, you have zero outlets left to turn to reset and then go back to the drawing board and learn from the mistakes and then ultimately progress in the thing that you actually care about.
Yeah, that's 100%. That's 100%. I'm in firm agreement with you on that. I think that, again, like, A big part of this is realizing that life without friction is never going to be excellent because you never get the satisfaction of exerting yourself, even if you fail. Another example that I use in the book is imagine that there's a button that you could press that just composes a Grammy award-winning piece of music and you can go win the award for it. How would that feel? And the answer is nothing, because the satisfaction of winning the award comes from the fact that it took you decades to create that piece of music. And with AI, we're getting to a place where you can actually just put that button and have the award-winning piece of music. And I think this book is also a call to use those tools. I'm not like a Luddite. Like in certain areas of your life, yeah, hit the button and make it efficient. But you've got to have other areas of your life where you're willingly engaging with friction in the process and the character development. Otherwise, when life gets so smoothed over, you have this zombie burnout where you're not burnt out from working too hard, but you're burnt out from not doing enough of what lights you up.
That's a really interesting example too, because it highlights the next challenge in modern civilization, which is what do we do with artificial intelligence in terms of leveraging it for good versus bad. But I think of that as, yeah, for someone who's using music as a means to an end for something else, hitting that quick, all right, I got some high quality tunes right available for me, and I didn't have to wait for some artist to spend the needed time to develop that. But then on the other end, you get the artist who is not going to find probably nearly the satisfaction of hitting that quick button versus going through that friction that we talked about. But what does that person end up doing in terms of an outlet for their work to make that a sustainable lifestyle for them to be able to keep pursuing? I think I wonder about just the consumer side of that. If there's enough kind of human emotion tied to just, oh, I'm listening to this song and I realize it took another human being a lot of time and energy to produce this versus I'm listening to the song and it's cool, but it took zero effort to really make.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. What I would argue is that some of the top 40 hits already just sound robotic. And
Yeah.
I think that there's a reason that they're so popular because the masses are content with that. But you're always going to have singer-songwriters who don't have massive followings, who aren't on the Billboard 100, but who are writing this heartfelt, soulful music. That the quality is just different because of what went into it. I want to come back to something that you said about pouring yourself like all in all the time that looks good on social media. This is a real important topic to double click on, I think, in the pursuit of excellence. So when you pursue excellence in something, let's take running as an example, and you care deeply about it and it aligns with your values, you start to identify with it, right? You say, I am a runner. And this is a very good thing. It means that you care. However, if your entire identity becomes just a runner, then that makes you quite fragile. Because if you don't perform well at running, that becomes a reflection of your entire self-worth. If you get injured, then who are you? If you have to retire from the sport because of aging or injury or whatever, again, then who are you? The way that I've come to think about building an identity that is robust enough to withstand setbacks and pitfalls, but also obsessive enough to really care about something and give it your all, is to think about identity like a house. And if a house only has one room in it and that one room catches fire, you're screwed. Like you got to move out of your house altogether. But if a house has multiple rooms in it and one room catches fire, you can go seek refuge in the other rooms. You fix the fire. You fix up that room that got burned. And it's helpful to think about our identities the same way. Like we should have an identity house with more than one room. So maybe the biggest room in your identity house is runner or coach or teacher or artist or writer or parent or husband or wife. But it's important to have other rooms too. And those other rooms could be athlete, music lover, dog lover, coffee aficionado, bookworm. It doesn't matter what the rooms are. It's just important to have more than one. And what I like about this is I'm not arguing for balance at all, because I'm not saying that the rooms need to be the same size and that you need to spend the same amount of time and energy in every room. I actually don't think that's a great prescription for an excellent life. I think what it does mean is that you just want to have more than one room. And at different seasons of life, you're going to probably spend different amount of time and energy in each of those rooms. And your job when you're going all in on something like running is just to make sure you're spending enough time in the creative room or the husband room or the wife room that those rooms don't get moldy. And I think that is just such a healthier construct for thinking about identity than road obsession, what all the bros say, make yourself isolated, miserable, go all in all the time, versus what the self-help industrial complex is obsessed with, which is you can have it all, just be balanced. That's bullshit. You can't have it all. Life is full of trade-offs.
Yeah.
But thinking of identity like a house with these different rooms goes such a long way, because I think that to pursue excellence, you have to be a little bit obsessed and a little bit crazy. But if you get too obsessed or too crazy, not only does it hurt your mental health, but it actually degrades your performance too.
Just a quick reminder that Element Electrolytes is my go-to electrolyte source. I know that I lose 614 milligrams of electrolytes for every liter of sweat. So on those training sessions, especially the hot days, I'll make sure I have a packet of one of their multiple flavors in with my fluids. Or if I'm looking for a refreshing post-workout beverage or just staying on top of electrolytes throughout the day, I will often lean to their cans of Element Sparkle, which are a very tasty treat after a hot training run. If you want to get a free sample pack with your next purchase, head over to drinklmnt.com/HPO.
That's perfect. And there was a recent real world example that I saw play out online that I thought was really interesting. It just actually coincided while I was reading the book too. So it was like the universe was like lining things up for me to really appreciate what you were trying to say. And it was the NFL season has really been picking up the last few weeks of the playoffs and everything like that. And there was a football player who he put up on his Instagram page a picture of him ice fishing. And it was like on a Monday where the team had an off day, a scheduled off day. And he was just getting flamed. They're like, you guys just lost your last 2 games and you got to be taking this seriously. What are you doing out there? You should be in the facility. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, just what you said is like, in order for him to actually put out quality effort and meaningful work when he's actually at the facility when he's supposed to, he probably does need to separate from him. It's not going to do him any good to sit there and watch film or bang out another set of weights or something like that on his off day, when the idea of that off day is that he actually disconnects so he can come back recharged and ready to actually absorb what was about to come to him from a preparation standpoint that the team had already predetermined.
Oh, I love that story. And ice fishing is probably the best thing that he can do. There's actually some research that shows that if you want to lower your stress response and attenuate like cortisol after a really challenging loss, the best thing to do is hang out with friends. I don't think that ice fishing is maybe the same as hanging out with friends, but I think the point is like, it's not like you're studying film and you're catastrophizing about what went wrong. Like you're chilling, you're moving into a different room of your identity house. If he was ice fishing 6 days a week for 3 hours a day, then he probably wouldn't be an NFL football player. But having that little room in his house where he can go when the football room is burning and just take some time to chill out makes him a better football player. And you see this in so many of the greats. And then you see the opposite in so many people. When they only have the one room in their identity house, they can burn really bright for a short period of time. But then the minute that there's some stress on the system, the whole thing explodes.
Yeah. It's another thing I've found with the same topic with running specifically is like group running versus solo training, especially when you have a very specific goal, where for me, I can motivate myself to get up and train solo for an entire training cycle if I want to. But what I find is when I interject group runs into that schedule, even if the group run is a slight deviation from what I would do by myself to follow the plan exactly, I get more value from that experience and therefore better productivity when the real quality sessions that matter need to be done, because I just turned what otherwise would have been an opportunity for me to sit there and maybe over obsess on a workout or stress out about if I did a good workout the time before. I'm like totally distracted because I'm in conversation with other people while I'm getting done at least something directionally aligned with what I should be doing if I were to do it by myself.
Yeah, I think that's another great example where like the efficiency of doing the workout on your own acutely is higher because you're going to be able to run the exact prescribed pace at the exact time of day that you want to do it. You're not going to have to coordinate schedules with someone, the exact mileage on the exact terrain that you want. And there's a time and a place for that. However, what you give up in acute efficiency when you do the group run, you might gain in long-term efficiency, which is by interjecting some of those group runs into your training cycle, you become a more resilient, robust runner who has more joy, satisfaction, and less stress. So if you had this key, I don't know, you tell me, 10 by 1 mile repeat workout, in the group is, we're going to do it at 6-minute pace and on hills. And you're like, no, I need to be running like 450s on a track. Then for that key workout, you should do it alone on a track. But if you were to treat every run in the training cycle like that key workout, that's like a lot of cognitive stress that you have to carry with you, when you might be more satisfied and have better long-term performance by letting go a little bit and doing some group runs. I think that's another great example.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting when you really start to thinking about, there's definitely a sort of what maybe feels like a 1 step back, 2 step forward approach with a lot of these things to really reaching that excellence or that mastery that we're craving at the end of the day.
Yeah. I think that you have to learn from life and experience. And generally, we don't learn from things that go really smoothly. We learn from things that don't go so smoothly. I think that's the core of a growth mindset, is when something happens, you can process the feelings, you can be frustrated, and then you can say, all right, what did this teach me? I like to call it a next play mentality, right? Like the play that just happened is in the past. So you analyze it, you learn from it, and then get on with the next play. The chess master, Maxime Legrave, I interviewed him for the book. It was a really interesting interview. And he has this mantra that he says when he blunders in a tournament and he feels all that dread and despair, he just says, play the board in front of you. And that's such a great metaphor for life. Play the board in front of you, not the board that you wish you were playing, not the board that you thought would be there, not the board before you had an error, but this is the board. I moved my pawn to the wrong spot. I can't believe I did it. This is the situation I'm in. How can I just lock in on that board?
Yeah, that's excellent. I love it. I want to touch on a topic you highlighted a little bit before too, which is we do get some of these extremes from time to time, especially with online stuff, where you'll get access to somebody who is going to be really motivating in one way or the other, but possibly not in line with what someone would want to do indefinitely. So I think the best example of this is probably David Goggins, because like he's in your face, he's extreme, and he's kicking the pants to a lot of people because he almost certainly is doing more than you, right? So the pitfall with that is thinking, all right, I need to match Goggins punch for punch or stride for stride. The value from that I see is, okay, here's a guy who is doing so much more than what he ever thought he was going to be able to do earlier in his life, and has reached these incredible states of success. How do I leverage that or use that as a tool to get me out the door when I should be and I'm procrastinating and know I shouldn't, versus when do I don't pull up David Goggins' Instagram page when I know I'm supposed to be taking a rest day?
Yeah. So I've never met Goggins. I think that Goggins helps a ton of people in that former category where like he's a great source of motivation. But I would just like to state facts, right? These aren't my opinions. These are facts. David Goggins is a world-class motivator, and he is probably world-class at voluntary suffering. He is not a world-class athlete. David Goggins has not won any kind of meaningful race that I'm aware of. He's not a world-class strength athlete. What he is great at is motivating people on the internet. So if you need motivation, going to Goggins to get motivated makes a ton of sense. If your dream is to be a personality on the internet, trying to follow in the footsteps of Goggins might make a lot of sense. If you want to be a better runner, I probably wouldn't follow in the footsteps of Goggins, because there are a million better ultramarathon runners than David Goggins. Courtney Dauwalter, Exhibit A, who has the opposite demeanor of David Goggins, actually wins races and sets records. You, Zach, probably train very differently than Goggins. You're not out there flexing your six-pack as hard as you can and telling yourself to man the fuck up and everything is angry always, but you're a better ultra runner than Goggins. So I think that so often we mistake a great motivator for a great craftsperson. And those are very different things. If you need motivation, go to Goggins, but remember that he's not actually great at running.
Yeah, it just shows you that we have all these tools available to us, and really the goal at the individual level is to figure out how to leverage them in a way that's actually going to produce the outcome that you're looking for, or get you to the destination you're trying to get to from a lot of it. And it's funny because we have all that, and then we also maintain a little bit of this black and white thinking, I think, where it becomes something where you have to either put David Goggins into this bad category or this great category. And there's really there's not as much conversation around that middle ground that you just shared.
And that's it. He's a world-class motivator. And if you are some dude that's like struggling with alcoholism and can't get off the couch and get your shit together, Goggins might save your life. If you're a high-functioning type A driving person to begin with, Goggins might put you overboard into burnout, illness, injury. So that's not Goggins' fault. It's a tool in the toolkit. I even joke, like sometimes like you got to pull out that Goggins. But if I pull out that Goggins when I'm parenting my 3-year-old daughter, that's not the appropriate tool for the situation.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Yeah, it is funny when you see that too, because you get the pull the opposite end of it too, where it's all compassion and kind of comfort seeking more or less too, where I think like sometimes you get like the popularity of someone like Goggins as a pendulum swing, or in the reverse, maybe you overextend too much from engaging with the Goggins type personalities, and then all of a sudden you find yourself swinging the other direction and craving just comforts and the relaxation. And then the reality is, it summarizes maybe a lot of what we've been talking about here, is there's this kind of middle ground there somewhere that you really want to exist in.
Yeah, the way I write about this in the book, this is in the section on discipline, is that it is true that the world is hard and cruel, and that no one is going to do your bidding for you, and that you have agency. At least I firmly believe this, and you need to exert your agency, and like taking accountability and personal responsibility. These things matter. They matter if you want to live a good life. They matter if you want to contribute. And at the same time, it is true that the world is broken and cruel, and it's really hard. And oftentimes you can exert your agency as best as you can, and structures and systems and shitty luck gets in the way. And you need to have your own back and be kind to yourself. It's not either or, it's both and, right? Like fierce self-discipline actually requires fierce self-kindness. Because if you can't be kind to yourself when you get unlucky or when you mess up, then you're never going to risk stepping back into the arena and laying it on the line again. So all of these elite performers that I reported on in the book, they are extreme badasses, but they are also very kind to themselves. They have high degrees of self-compassion. So to your point, it's not let's all hold hands and sing Kumbaya and go to the yoga retreat. It's not all Goggins, get your shit together always. It is the combination of those two qualities that helps support excellence over the long haul.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd be curious what you think about this. If you had somebody who like read your book and was like, okay, I get it, I understand the value of the pursuit of excellence and how that brings meaning. I'm currently working a job that's maybe a little boring, not something I'm necessarily excited about, but at the end of the day, we live in the real world, like you said, and bills need to be paid. And if that's their best option to do that, maybe that's a non-negotiable for them. Do you find they're better off trying to find or carve out some form of excellence within that career? Or is it something where in that situation, they're better off exploring that pursuit of excellence on some hobby or something outside of that in order to make that job a supporting piece to be able to do those other things?
Yeah, I can't be prescriptive without having more details on a situation, right? So I think the answer is it depends. Painting in broad strokes, some jobs are just rote, boring kind of corporate jobs, and they pay well, and you do spreadsheets all day and you go to pointless meetings, but you get to support your kids and you get to travel and you have a nice house and your life is pretty good. For those jobs, I'd say, yeah, don't try to be excellent at going to pointless meetings. Start ultra running, start woodworking, start gardening, start playing guitar, crochet. I don't care what it is, but find something in your leisure time where you can pursue excellence. And I actually think that pursuing excellence in leisure time is wonderful because you have full agency. Like no one's telling you what to do. You get to do it on your own terms. So if you're very fortunate and you're very lucky, and I put both of us in this category, right? Like your profession is a craft that you care about. My profession is a craft that I care about. We pursue excellence first and foremost in our craft. However, if I had a corporate job, I think this book would be every bit as important, maybe even more important, because it would set the foundation for how I'm going to strength train for me and for someone who runs not as a professional, how they're going to run. I find this so often in woodworkers who have these like horribly boring, tedious, go through the motions job, but they're all like 9 to 4 jobs. So they just get home and they go to the shop and then like they're in heaven, and that's awesome. And a lot of these people eventually after years end up being full-time woodworkers. So it's a long-winded way of saying that another misconception maybe is that excellence has to be in a profession when it can very much be in a hobby.
Just a quick reminder that Delta G ketones is my go-to exogenous ketone source. I will take these after my big training sessions as well as during my long runs at lower intensity and longer races at lower intensity. You can get 20% off your next purchase by going to deltagketones.com and entering promo code BITTER20.
Mm-hmm. And it can start very elementary too, or it should start very elementary if you're new to it.
It has
I
to,
think that's also, yeah. And it's the professional woodworker, maybe that, especially the scenario that you described where they were down the career path, and the woodworking thing just presented itself eventually when they got to a point where their product was desirable enough to sell. They probably never planned for that to be the case. So for that to be the end goal up front would have been defeating the purpose of the exploration to begin with.
And that's how I got into writing, to be honest. Like I had a corporate job and it was fine, but it was very clear that I wasn't going to be excellent at it. So I started doing long course triathlon, and I was a very good high school football player. So I'm not built like an endurance athlete. And it was just the quest, and I got pretty good at it. And this is late 2000s blogosphere, internet 1.0. And I had a blog, and I was just writing because I had this job that wasn't very hard and I had all this time to write. And for 5 years, I just pursued excellence as a hobby in writing. And then eventually I got some lucky breaks and I got good enough where I started to get paid. And I haven't been in the corporate world for a decade. I'm a professional writer now. So what you're describing is the exact path that I took. I didn't go to journalism school. I didn't have elite writing training. I cared deeply about it, and I wrote in a way that aligned with my values, and I got really good at it. And a boring corporate job enabled me to get good at it because it paid the bills.
Yeah, it highlights something. I know you're good friends with Steve Magnus, and he's been on the podcast a couple of times, and he talks about just making sure that when you start something or pursuits, you compete locally and then work your way up from there. Exactly. Yeah. Because we live in a world where global access digitally is infinite. And it goes back to what we were talking before, where if I decided to pick up woodworking, I could go on Instagram and find some of the best woodworkers in the world.
And you're just totally like, defeated by, how can I do this? Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I need to go to a beginner's class or something.
Yeah. And maybe don't even compete. Maybe at first, like just compete against yourself. And what's nice though, is coming back to something that we talked about earlier, when you're new, you do get 1% better every day. You often get 50% better every day. So you can also use that as fuel to keep coming back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wonder about that too, just from the educational side of all of this too, where how do we better expose people to like maybe what that ends up looking like? So or maybe this is part of the journey, is not having this kind of laid out for you as a blueprint. But I could imagine if I saw like a world-class woodworker, like a timeline of what was their first piece as it evolved, and see, oh, okay, I see how this scales over time. Maybe that kind of keeps the momentum going for me. Or maybe the endurance version of this would be like, I watch the Olympics and I see Cole Walker win the 1500 meter. And then I could look back and be like, oh, when he first started, he was only running 2 times a week, and realized maybe I shouldn't be training every day, twice a day in order to get to where I want to be within running.
Yeah, that's right. There's no such thing as an overnight breakthrough. And we see the stone cracking on Instagram and on the news, but what we don't see is the years of someone sitting there pounding a stone and there's no visible improvement, but like all this tension is building and then eventually it cracks. And if we compare ourselves to someone's finished product, not their first couple of days when we're a beginner, we're going to feel completely overwhelmed. So it's drawing inspiration from someone who's much, much further down the path. At the same time, competing against ourselves early on and having the satisfaction not come from being better than someone else, but come from getting that 1% better. And then after a year, 5 years, a decade, you stop getting 1% better. And then it shifts back to curiosity and self-discovery. And maybe, if depending on the pursuit, like actual competition, you might not be getting faster, but you can still show up to a race and try to win.
Yeah. I think about this a lot of times with respect to like how we structure our education system too, and like where are the successful models that actually introduce enough curiosity and exploration within that kind of that framework of those early years, where you got this more like large opportunity to explore, fail, and find what you're good at, find what you're maybe not good at, or what you enjoy or you don't enjoy, because like you don't have to be good at something to really enjoy it. It seems like you almost need a little bit more of a like an open playground, so to speak, to really draw this stuff out of people. So if there's maybe a question in there, I would be curious if you were like structuring like a school system or something, what kind of like frameworks would you put in place in order to really drive people into understanding that this is something that they should be striving for with respect to excellence as they go through life and kind of learn what that's all about?
Yeah, it's way out of my wheelhouse because I'm not an educator. I can
You know, would
give you
develop
an
any curriculum here today?
I can give you an example from my 7-year-old son, though, that I think is just awesome. So he is in second grade, and him and his friends are all like super into Pokemon cards. Okay. They love Pokemon. And in art class, they created their own Pokemon game. So they're making all their own Pokemon cards. So there's these printout cards, and he's so stoked to go to art because he gets to create this Pokemon game. I have no doubt that if he went to art and he had to do line sketches or whatever the kind of wrote, this is what a second grader should be learning in art, he would not like art at all. So I think that by finding something, to use my definition, that aligns with his values, age appropriate language, a 7-year-old values Pokemon, whatever, creativity, imagination, then suddenly art becomes this thing that he looks forward to that is really interesting versus just like, all right, the curriculum says you need to draw lines. Come on, like all those kids are going to get bored. I guess if I had to say it, I think that, again, because the pendulum can swing, right? The problem with just free play is then kids don't learn the basics and no one can do math. And Derek Thompson, the writers, covered this really well, that like people can't do math anymore because there was too much kind of free play. So we do need, I think, some rigorous standards and criteria for education. But I think that if we can learn the things that lead to those rigorous standards and criteria in more interesting ways, then kids will be more engaged. So my son also loves sports, and he got really good at math. You know how he got really good at math? We watched a ton of football. And there's all kinds of permutations of math. And I just will ask him during the game. I'll be like, Theo, if the Patriots kick 2 field goals and get a safety and then score a touchdown and miss the extra point, how many points would they have? And that's how we practice math. And he loves it. He's like, give me more scenarios. Now, if I told him and I said, Theo, what's 6 plus 6 plus 7 plus 2? He'd be like, I don't care. So like, I think you got to just try to find what people value in the moment and then align things with that.
Yeah, that's spot on. I think like when I was still teaching, I was at a school that was project based, and that was essentially the build out that they had, where we all understood there were going to be things that they needed to master in order to move on to the next level, whether that be like employment or to go off to college and things like that. So there were the standards, but then there's a million different ways to get to those standards. So the way they did is they would make these like topic-based seminars that were essentially voted on by the students in terms of interests. And then as the teachers, we would build the frameworks of how do we implement math, science, reading, writing, all that other stuff into this. And it sort of set up, it was new and it was imperfect, but it was definitely like more aligned with kind of what you were saying, where you gave that initial pull to the student to get interested, get excited about it, and almost accidentally start doing some of those things they'd otherwise maybe resist when it was more formal.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great example too.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. One other thing I did want to touch on a little bit with you with respect to this topic as a whole is when we talk about I really like that concept of going up the side of the mountain to get to the mountaintop, because I think that one really does teach us where the true value is within the pursuit itself, versus it being something of just, I'm going to be at the top of this mountain and then that's going to be the big payoff there. So when we're looking at something like that, one problem I sometimes will see with people is they pick that goal of the top of the mountain and they understand the work that leads to it, maybe the big payoff, but it's a little harder to get small wins along the way unless it's scaffolded out. So how important do you think that is to back up after you have that and set these kind of micro goals along the way that will ultimately support that end goal, but give people little short-term things to keep them motivated when some of the sparkle wears off, similar to what you'd see with the New Year's resolution type stuff?
Yeah, I think it's hugely important. The bigger the goal, the smaller the steps. Because if you just have the big inspirational goal, then to your point, after that initial inspiration wears off, it's just overwhelming. An interesting example from the book was when I was talking to Kelly Humphreys, who's a 5-time Olympian, 3-time gold medalist, and 5-time world champion in the bobsled. So she's been dominating the sport for 20 years, just insane. And I asked her about like how her longevity, like how she's managed this. And what she told me is that every 4 years, she has a really simple goal, which is to be the best in the world, the Olympics. I'm like, all right, we'll talk about simple, not easy. And then I'm like, then what? And she's each year is broken down into these 2-by-2 year blocks. And each of those 2-year windows has a very specific purpose, right? There's like building the base and then there's sharpening the saw. And then each of those 2-year blocks is broken down into 1 year, and each of those years has a purpose. And then each year we have an emphasis with my coach every quarter. And then each quarter gets broken down into months, and each month we're moving on this micro level. And then each month gets broken down to weeks, and each week has a specific emphasis. And then weeks get broken down to days. And the way that I think about a 4-year Olympic cycle is by thinking about my workout today. And I think like that kind of mindset is just so important because it keeps us grounded and focused in the process. It keeps us patient, and it gives us those small micro victories along the way. I like to think about it, as I said, the bigger the goal, the smaller the steps, but also dig where your feet are. So the goal might be the top of the mountain, but if you're looking up, if your head's cocked up and all you're doing is looking and daydreaming about the top of the mountain, you're going to trip and fall off the side. So the best way to get to the top of the mountain is to dig where your feet are, like to do what you have to do today.
Yeah, that's so powerful. And it's similar to, I think it was Roger Federer who gave a speech or a presentation at one point. He was talking about that same idea of just, he won so many majors and so many matches and so many games and all that stuff. But along the way, he broke it down as like my success rate within any individual volley was like 52%. So he was failing almost as much as he was succeeding, but because he was successful when it mattered and had that mindset to be in the moment and treat that next match or that next volley as the focus at the time, that just set himself up in a situation where he like just won a ton, even though you wouldn't think so by looking at those percentages.
Yeah, I love it. I think that's another great example. I know that speech. It was a commencement speech. I forgot what school he gave it at. And that's it. Like, you got to dig where your feet are. Like, that's the core of consistency. And if you want to be excellent, you got to be consistent.
Yeah. And I think that one just sums it up nicely too, because it also shows the value of being comfortable with failure too. If you want to get to be great, you have to be comfortable with failure, because that's just part of the process.
Yeah, that's right. It brings to mind this notion of brave new world, which comes from the chapter on curiosity, and how curiosity is like a nice antidote to fear and failure. And essentially, what it says is that when you are stepping into the arena to do something that you might fail at, telling yourself that I've got this is not going to be helpful, because you don't know if you have it, right? You can't lie to yourself. Telling yourself, oh no, I don't know if I have this, is also not going to be helpful, because then you're freaking out. But telling yourself brave new world, which means this is a new horizon for me. I don't know what's going to happen, but it's sure going to be interesting to see. That kind of curiosity is so associated with peak performance. And to me, that is how you overcome failure. That is how you take on these big goals. It's just a mindset of brave new world. Maybe I'll fail, maybe I won't, but let's find out. I walk up to the bar with more weight ever loaded on it. Brave new world. We have our second child in the delivery room. I turn to my wife. I'm just like, brave new world. I get a writing assignment for a publication I've never written for, where I feel like the bar is higher than I've ever done before. Brave new world. And I think like that mindset is just so crucial to the ongoing infinite game of excellence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's perfect. I think thinking of it through all those different kind of lenses that you described is just such a valuable thing to consider when you're going in that process, whether it be starting something new or trying to actually get a little more centered around excellence with whatever pursuits you're currently on.
Yeah, I am so grateful to have been able to have this conversation with you, man.
Yeah, it was great to have you back on, Brad. I'm looking forward to getting this one up. And if you don't mind, before I let you go, if you want to share where people can find you online, social media, and that sort of thing, and then ultimately any details on your book, I'll put all that stuff in the show notes as well.
Great. Thank you, Zach. And thank you, listeners. The book is called The Way of Excellence. I think that it is the best place to start. It's the culmination of everything I've been working on really for the last 15 years. So before going on to social media, read the book. You'll have a much better experience, I promise. If you've then read the book and you want to find me on social media, the platform I'm most active on these days is Substack, where I'm at Brad Stulberg. And my Instagram is also my name, at Brad Stulberg. But yeah, I'd be happy if you start and end with the book because it's my best work.
Awesome. And hey, if we want to add some friction, you have to finish the book before you can go back on Instagram. That's perfect.
I love it. I love it. Read the book with a pen and take notes. And in all seriousness, like the book is the artifact, but really the real, yes, there's friction in reading a book. You have to focus. It's hard. Hopefully it's not too hard because I'm a decent writer. But like the real work is after you've read the book, like you try to apply this stuff and like you have conversations with colleagues, with friends, with family members. Like the book is a conversation starter. But I think the conversation on reclaiming excellence in like the genuine heartfelt excellence in our modern numbed out pseudo hustle porn world, that's a really important conversation. So read the book and then start having that conversation and get curious about it.
Yeah, it is a great book to read alongside somebody else if you have that opportunity, because there are a lot of great discussion points that I think just add a lot of flavor to it when you get someone else's kind of thoughts around different things that you introduce. So hopefully people will get their hands on it, read it in a group or something like that, and really extract all the value out of it. But thanks again, Brad, for coming on and sharing some of your wisdom.
Just a quick reminder that ProBio Nutrition is my go-to supplement for all my micronutrients and digestive needs. The reason I like it is it was developed by my good friend, Dr. Mark Bubbs. He has had a lot of experience working with successful individuals that have busy, active lifestyles, including Olympians, NBA basketball players, professional hockey players. One of the things he noticed was a lot of supplements were not only mislabeled, but not very effective. So he went about to try to lower the friction point there by making it as easy as having one scoop of ProBio Nutrition every day. I will take it with either water, smoothie, or mix it in with my yogurt once per day, and then I'm done. And I can rest at ease knowing that along with a good diet, I'll have all those micronutrients and digestive needs met. Head over to probionutrition.com and enter promo code ENDURANCE for 20% off your next order. Thanks for tuning into this episode of the Human Performance Outliers podcast with Zach Bitter.